Jamari Ellis had always measured his life in split seconds. From the moment he laced up his spikes as a child on the cracked municipal track to the aerated roar of the National Trials Stadium, every heartbeat, every muscle contraction, every exhale had been refined for one purpose: to cross the finish line first. His signature wasn't just his explosive starts or his lean, powerful stride. It was the crown of tightly coiled locks he wore high above his brow, a testament to his heritage and a challenge to the homogeneity of elite track. When the Olympic selection camp opened its gates on a muggy July morning, Jamari stepped onto the blue-surfaced lanes with his usual calm intensity, until he spotted Coach Bradshaw waiting at the first hurdle, clipboard in hand. Their eyes met. Jamari nodded respectfully, but Bradshaw's mouth tightened. No greeting, no smile. Instead, a curt crossover. Sidestep to lane 9. You run last today. Jamari froze mid-warm-up lap. Lane 9 was the bullpen for alternates, runners who might as well be invisible. The sun beat down as his teammates, white short-haired athletes in matching aerodynamic suits, slid into lanes 1 through 8. He'd earned a top 5 qualifying time in the semifinals. The automatic bracket should have placed him squarely in the center. Yet here he was, wounded and benched, his hair cited as the culprit. Later, in the cramped confines of the coach's tent, Jamari confronted Bradshaw. "Why me?" he asked quietly, voice measured. "My times qualify me for lane 4, not the bench." Bradshaw's eyes flicked to the twisting coils atop Jamari's head. "There's an optics issue. Our sponsors, some overseas markets, prefer a cleaner look. The locks are distracting." He leaned in. "You're too unconventional for prime lanes." The words landed like a blow. Jamari's heart thundered, not with the surge of competition, but with the sting of betrayal. He thought of every dawn run, every weight room session, every sacrifice he'd made to reach this moment. Now, a corporate piece of paper demanded he trim his hair before they'd let him compete for his country. That evening in the athlete dormitory, Jamari sat before a chipped mirror. His locks, wound in a tall knot, caught the fluorescent glare. He closed his eyes and replayed Bradshaw's words. Distracting, unconventional, optics. Underneath the hurt, something older and stronger flared. His family's tradition of resistance, the ancestors who'd refused to yield their identities. He reached for his phone and texted his mother. "Can't believe this. They benched me over my hair. What do I do?" Her reply was instant, resolute. "Be yourself or be nothing. Roots run deep." The next morning, as dew still clung to the lanes, Jamari jogged toward lane 4, ignoring the coach's scramble to redirect him. He whispered to himself, "I run for more than medals." Weeks of training had honed his body. Now his spirit hardened. He would prove that no hairstyle, no sponsor demand, no narrow-minded coach could dictate whether he belonged on the Olympic track. And so, with locks held high and resolve unshaken, Jamari Ellis stepped into the heart of the arena, preparing to turn every sneer into awe, every benching into a platform from which to launch the fastest race of his life. Word of Jamari Ellis's lane reassignment spread through the Olympic camp like wildfire. By dawn, whispers darted down the dormitory hallways. "I heard they benched him because of his hair. He's the fastest in the country. What nonsense is this?" Even veteran sprinters, accustomed to the politics behind the blocks, shook their heads. That morning's practice crackled with tension. Jamari jogged out onto the bright tartan track, his ankles encased in kinesiology tape and muscles humming with anticipation. He should have been the first starter in the 8-lane time trial, but instead found himself in the 9-man alternates group, huddled under a mildewed umbrella with fellow reserves. Lane 9 felt like a punishment cell, a reminder that despite posting one of the top times in trials, he was deemed unfit for the spotlight because his locks didn't fit the brand image. As the gun fired for the main draw's warm-up sprint, Jamari held his breath, the roar of the crowd on the arena televisions calling to him. He could taste the electric energy of competition, so close, yet barred by prejudice. His coach since high school, Simone Carter, approached with concern etched in her eyes. They can't do this to you, she said, voice low but fierce. Your hair is part of who you are, part of why you run like the wind. We'll fight this. Simone stormed toward Coach Bradshaw's tent, but before she could speak, Bradshaw emerged, arms folded. They stood nose to nose as Simone accused, "You're sidelining him for hair? Under the guise of sponsorship?" Bradshaw's jaw clenched. "Simone, this is bigger than sprint times. The IOC marketing partners have voiced concerns. If we want full funding," Simone snapped back, "funding at the cost of your athlete's dignity? You're trading his right to compete for corporate appeasement." But Bradshaw brushed past her, leaving her voice to trail behind him like a breech flag in the wind. Later, in the cafeteria, Jamari sat alone at a corner table, tray untouched. Teammates offered sympathetic nods, but no solace. The National Sports Federation's PR director, a sleek official named Murray Gates, sidled up. "Jamari," he began, voice oily, "you're in a tough spot. Sponsors threaten to pull out if your image doesn't align." Jamari's eyes flared. "My image? You mean my heritage? My hair?" He rose, tray tipping. "I didn't run my fastest times by fitting into someone else's mold." He let the abrupt motion speak louder than words and strode off, Murray's apology swallowed by the clang of cafeteria doors. The next afternoon, the media arrived en masse. A camera crew set up at the track's entrance, lights aimed at the starting blocks. Reporters peppered Simone with questions as Jamari approached. "Is it true they benched you alone because of your locks? How do you respond to charges you're underdressed for international standards?" Jamari scanned the lenses, the faces of people who'd honored him for his speed, but now turned away at his hair. He took a steadying breath, then picked up a discarded hair tie from the ground. With reverent ceremony, he looped it around his locks, drawing the strands into a high, sturdy bun. His movements held the gravity of ritual. Each coil bound not just hair, but defiance. Stepping under the spotlight, Jamari faced the microphones. I refuse to sacrifice my identity for a lane assignment," he declared. "If our image standards exclude a black man for his heritage, then those standards are broken." His words echoed off the bleachers, rippling through the press gallery. Simone gave a proud nod as cameramen clicked furiously. That evening, video of Jamari's impromptu press statement exploded online. "They benched me for my hair, but I won't bench my pride." Thousands of shares ignited a firestorm. Fans, activists, and even fellow Olympians voiced support. A petition demanding his reinstatement in the prime lanes gathered 500,000 signatures overnight. Sponsors scrambled to comment. Federation officials scrambled to contain the backlash. By midnight, the camp buzzed with one question: would the coaches hold, or would they bow to the groundswell demanding equality? As Jamari settled in for a restless night, he knew the struggle had only just begun, yet in every beat of his racing heart, he felt the power of his roots fueling the fight ahead. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Jamari Ellis laced up his spikes for the day's first time trial, the air thick with humidity and anticipation. After his impromptu press conference the evening before, camp security buzzed with speculation. Would he run as scheduled or face further discipline for what many now hailed as a principled stand? As he stepped onto the track, Jamari spotted Coach Bradshaw standing at the finish line, arms folded, lips pressed into a hard line. Yet Bradshaw's eyes betrayed uncertainty, an admission that the coach's authority had been shaken. Jamari drew in a deep breath, centering himself on the measured cadence of his heartbeat, the familiar rhythm that had carried him through every race since childhood. The starter's pistol cracked through the morning mist, and Jamari launched himself down the lanes, each powerful stride a declaration of defiance. As he rounded the final curve, he felt the elastic snap of the stadium's collective gaze. He crossed the line in 9.92 seconds, easily his fastest time of the season, and jogged back, heart still racing from the sprint and the knowledge that every eye in the arena had witnessed his speed and resolve. But there was no triumphant applause. Instead, Bradshaw raised his whistle, its shrill blast cutting through the hush. "Jamari Ellis," he announced, voice amplified by the stadium speakers, "you are disqualified for failing to follow channel assignments and for engaging with unauthorized media. Any further infractions will result in removal from the team. The whistle's echo lingered, punctuating the coach's edict. Jamari's chest tightened, but he refused to flinch. He jogged to Bradshaw's side, wiping sweat from his brow. "Coach," he said calmly, "my channel assignment was changed by the Federation without explanation, because of my hair, and the only unauthorized media here are the sponsors who demanded I erase my identity." A murmur rippled through the gathered athletes and staff. Junior sprinters exchanged glances, while veteran decathletes, those who'd seen their share of politics and sport, nodded in solidarity. Even the starter, a retired Olympic official, cleared his throat and said softly, "Rules shouldn't be twisted to silence an athlete's voice." Behind the chain-link fence, the assembled press recorded every word. Simone Carter, her expression fierce with pride, clicked record on her phone from the stands. The Federation's PR director, Murray Gates, scurried forward, attempting to intercept Jamari. "Son, you need to—" Jamari held up a gloved hand. "No," he said. "I won't be silenced by a whistle or a corporate memo. My performance here speaks louder than any disqualification. If a sport that prides itself on meritocracy can't respect my right to compete as I am, then it's time for those rules to change." With that, he removed his spikes and handed them to Simone, signaling his intent to sit out the remainder of the trials until the lane assignments were restored. A ripple of applause rose from around the track, an outpouring of support that few coaches could ignore. That afternoon, the Federation's Executive Council convened an emergency session. Footage of the disqualification and Jamari's defiant stand looped on the walls of their boardroom. Sponsors, who had once threatened to withdraw funding, now pressured the council to reinstate L is in the prime lanes. International athletes called on the Federation to uphold the spirit of fair play. By evening, an official communique arrived at the camp. Effective immediately, all lane assignments for Mr. Jamari Ellis are nullified and reassigned strictly according to qualifying times. Any attempt to impede his competition will be met with sanctions against coaching staff and sponsors. As the sun dipped below the stadium lights, Jamari returned to the track, his locks tied high, his stride poised, his spirit unbroken. The starter's pistol cracked once more, and he surged forward, every muscle and mind aligned in purpose. With each thunderous footfall, he carried the weight of injustice off his shoulders, replacing it with the exhilaration of a race run on his own terms, and in doing so, propelled the sport toward a more inclusive future. 10 days later, Jamari Ellis stood under the blinding noon sun in the Olympic Stadium of Paris. The roar of 80,000 spectators ebbing and flowing like a living tide. Banners in every language fluttered above the stands, but one chant rang clear: ELLIS, Ellis, Ellis. His trademark locks, coiled high and secured with the same black hair tie, shone beneath the floodlights. A crown not just of hair, but of hard-won defiance. In the athlete's village, Simone Carter clasped his shoulder. "They've recreated your lane bench," she reminded him gently, nodding at the digital board where his name glowed in lane 4. The roar-triggering middle lane reserved for the fastest seeds. "This is your moment." Jamari inhaled the dizzying mix of accents and flags, the smell of fresh-painted track mingling with the tang of chlorinated pools. He visualized the starting blocks, a grid of cold metal that would soon vibrate under his explosive drive. Across the infield, competitors stretched and danced, their bodies sculpted into aerodynamic perfection. Yet none wore their identities as proudly as Jamari. None carried the collective weight of every athlete silenced by dogma. When the quarterfinal heats were called, Jamari jogged onto the track, chest lifted, gaze straight ahead. As he approached the blocks, the announcer's voice cut through the tension. "In lane 4, representing the United States, Jamari Ellis." A thunderous applause greeted him, an echo of that viral uprising that had rewritten his national federation's rules. He crouched into the blocks, fingertips splayed across the rubberized surface, locks brushing the lane marker. The starter raised his pistol. Jamari's world narrowed to the imbalance of weight in his feet, the smooth slide of his muscles, the promise of the gun's crack. Bang! He leapt forward, driving each knee upward, each arm slicing fiercely. The synthetic curve of the first 50 meters blurred beneath him. The crowd's crescendo melded into the rhythm of his breath. At the halfway mark, he felt the delicate tug of wind resistance, yet his form held, optimized by years of training that had sculpted every fiber of his being. As he powered into the home stretch, his eyes flicked to the peripheral. A sea of opposing jerseys drained behind him. The finish line beckoned like a beacon, and when he crossed it in 9.89 seconds, his personal best at altitude, the stadium erupted. Fireworks burst overhead, the national anthem's first strains humming through speakers, and Jamari raised his arms, locks swinging in triumphant arcs. Later that evening, in the locker room scented with eucalyptus coolers and victory fumes, Jamari peeled off his spikes. Simone handed him his phone. Notifications piled high. Locks for gold, race and respect. Ellis makes history. But Jamari's mind raced ahead to tomorrow's semifinal, knowing the true trial awaited not in quarterfinal glory, but in sustaining this momentum under the world's gaze. He closed his eyes and whispered to his reflection in the locker's polished chrome, "This hair is my heritage. These spikes are my wings. Together we carry every athlete who's ever been benched for being themselves." As the applause from dinnertime concerts drifted through the village windows, Jamari unlocked a new lock within himself, proof that on these foreign tracks, identity and excellence ran hand in hand, and that no lane assignment could contain the force of an athlete set free. The morning of the Olympic 100-meter final arrived like a heartbeat echoing through history. Jamari Ellis emerged from the athletes' village at dawn, sunlight glinting off the Seine in the distance. Every stride toward the stadium carried the weight of his journey, from the municipal track sidelined for his hair to the center lane where he now stood shoulder to shoulder with the world's fastest sprinters. His locks, wrapped in a sleek black band, formed a proud plume that framed his steely gaze. Inside the colossal Stade de France, the energy was electric. 8 finalists filed into their lanes, veterans with Olympic medals gleaming on their chests, youthful phenoms hungry for glory, and Jamari, the man whose fight for identity had become as legendary as his speed. Coaches lined the infield, broadcasters hovered over podiums, and millions watched on screens worldwide. Banners fluttered with messages of support. Let him run. Locks for gold. Justice on the track. Jamari stepped into the blocks at lane 4. To his right and left, competitors in streamlined helmets bent low, their bodies coiled, spring-tight. He breathed deep, palms pressing the rubber ridges, muscles twitching with controlled tension. Above him, the stadium lights blurred into a halo as he blocked out the roar and honed in on the starter's commands. On your marks. His world contracted to the tactile sensation of block grips, the charged hum in the air, the rhythmic exhale of his lungs. Set. He rose, hamstrings coiled like steel cables, every fiber pulsing with latent power. Bang! Jamari exploded forward, knee driving upward, arms pumping in perfect opposition. The world fractured into 10-meter segments. First, a surge that left the field neck and neck. Second, a gliding transition as he hit top speed. Third, the final 30 meters, where the question of muscle and will would decide legacies. Halfway down the straightaway, he felt a phantom tug at his crown. Memories of locked doors and lane reassignments flickered at the edges of his focus, and he channeled it into raw propulsion. His body stretched long, sinew and sweat braided into each stride. Behind him, fellow finalists faltered by inches, some gritting teeth, others clawing at exhaustion. Ahead, the finish line pulsed like a promise. In those stubborn final steps, Jamari bore the collective breath of every athlete who'd ever been benched for who they were. He leaned forward, driving through the tape, then staggered to a halt as the stadium erupted. 9.84, blared the scoreboard, an Olympic record. First, Jamari Ellis, USA. Tears blurred Jamari's vision as he uncoiled from the blocks. Spectators, once silent or skeptical, leaped to their feet, flags whipping the air in a jubilant storm. He raised both arms triumphantly, locks catching the isle of confetti that cascaded like multicolored rain. Simone Carter surged onto the track, enveloping him in an embrace as cameras swarmed. On the victory podium, as the American anthem swelled, Jamari's gold medal gleamed against his chest. He closed his eyes, recalling the night a coach had sidelined him for his hair, the viral outcry that had forced lane reassignment, and the global solidarity that had carried him to this moment. Each note of the anthem resonated with vindication. A personal triumph, yes, but also a resounding declaration that bias could never outrun excellence. In the mixed zone afterward, reporters pressed microphones before him. Jamari, how does it feel to break the Olympic record after being benched for your hair? He smiled, locks bouncing with emotion. It feels like justice, he replied. This medal isn't just mine. It belongs to every athlete who's ever been told they don't fit the mold. Excellence knows no uniform, no hairstyle, no stereotype. Back in the athletes' village that evening, a celebration erupted. Teammates hoisted him aloft, local media streamed live from his room, and sponsors who'd once balked now flooded his inbox with partnership offers. But Jamari looked past the fanfare to the lane-marked track outside, where his reflection shimmered in the floodlit surface, his locks a silhouette of defiance. As fireworks painted the Parisian sky, Jamari Ellis stood on his balcony, the gold medal embossed with Olympic rings resting in his hand. He whispered a vow to the wind. This victory changes the sport. Let no runner ever again be judged for the hair on their head. And beneath the fireworks' roar, the world knew he would keep running, for himself, for future generations, and for the promise that true greatness is found in both speed and selfhood. In the days following Jamari Ellis's Olympic triumph, the world's media engines roared to life, transforming what had been a personal victory into a global reckoning on identity, bias, and the power of sport. Morning talk shows replayed his record-setting sprint frame by frame, highlighting not just his stride, but the proud silhouette of his locks cutting the wind. Headlines blared, "Champion of Change," "Gold Medalist Defies Discrimination," "Ellis Forces Global Fairness Inquiry." At the U.S. Olympic Committee's Washington, D.C. headquarters, a hastily convened panel of Federation officials, sponsor representatives, and ethics advisors sat beneath the vaulted conference room lights. The CEO tapped a printed front-page editorial across the table. By forcing Ellis to sit in an alternate's lane, the Federation betrayed its own ideals. We must answer for this. First on the agenda was a televised public hearing, live-streamed to millions under the banner, "Sport Without Walls," an inquiry into lane assignment bias. Sitting at a long dais were Federation executives, Coach Bradshaw, who now faced tough questioning, and Jamari himself, flanked by his legal counsel and his coach, Simone Carter. The lead moderator, a respected former Olympian, opened with gravity. "Mr. Ellis, you were benched for your hair, denied your rightful lane. Today we examine whether such policies have no place in modern sport." Jamari rose, the gold medal still draped in his blazer. His voice, calm yet unwavering, carried across lecture hall speakers. Sport is supposed to be the great equalizer. Yet I was judged not by my times, but by traditions that confuse uniformity with unity. My lane belonged to me by merit, not by conformity. Behind him, 24 athletes, sprinters, long jumpers, decathletes, took the podium one by one, each recounting their own brushes with appearance-based regulations. Hair-length bans, uniform-style decrees, cultural rules that favored certain body types. A high jumper from Kenya spoke of being fined for braiding her hair. A shot putter from Jamaica described forced tape removal from her dreadlocks. Their testimonies painted a tapestry of systemic bias stretching far beyond one coach's clipboard. Next, Coach Bradshaw faced sharp cross-examination. Sponsors and Federation board members leaned in as he admitted, "I received instructions, verbal, that we needed a market-friendly look. Hell, I knew it felt wrong. But I thought I had no choice." His voice cracked when Simone pressed, "Was protecting your job worth denying an athlete his?" The stadium of microphones recorded his silence. Outside, crowds gathered in city squares, from New York's Times Square to Tokyo's Shibuya Crossing, viewing the hearings on giant screens, waving "Let athletes be themselves" placards. Social media influencers streamed live reactions. This isn't just an athlete's fight, it's ours. Hashtags trended in every language. Number Ellis Inquiry, number Hair in Honor, number Fair Play Now. By evening, the Federation announced a sweeping set of reforms: an international code of athlete expression, banning any appearance-based lane assignments, mandatory cultural competency training for all coaches and officials, and a global athlete ombuds office, an independent body to field future grievances. The sponsor consortium, previously rumored to threaten boycotts, issued a joint statement. "We stand with athletes' rights to compete as they are, free from arbitrary aesthetic demands." In the hush of his hotel room, Jamari watched the reform announcements on his tablet, the city's lights flickering beyond the window. He reflected on the journey: a single hair tie, a disqualifying whistle, and the roar of an Olympic crowd had cascaded into system-wide change. The rules that once tried to confine him had been rewritten under public pressure, shaped by every voice that had asked, why should an athlete's hair dictate his place in history? As night deepened, Simone joined him by the window, her eyes bright with pride. "You've done more than win a gold medal," she said softly. "You've changed the game." Jamari smiled, knowing the true finish line lay not at a tape across a track, but in the unwritten pages of sport's future, now accessible to every athlete, in every lane, who dared to be themselves. In the months after the public inquiry and the Federation's historic reforms, Jamari Ellis transitioned from Olympic champion to global ambassador for equitable sport. His schedule overflowed with invitations, from the United Nations Youth Assembly to grassroots track meets in underserved communities. But he never lost sight of the track that had launched his journey. On a crisp autumn morning, he returned to his childhood track in East Chicago, the same cracked asphalt lanes where his mother first taught him to sprint and where his locks first caught the wind. Jamari knelt at the starting line and ran a solitary time trial, each stride a meditation on his path, the benching over his hair, the defiant press conference, the Olympic gold that forced systemic overhaul. As he crossed the makeshift tape in 9.87 seconds, just shy of his world record, local kids cheered from the bleachers, their own hair pulled into twists and braids, unafraid to express their roots. He greeted them with fist bumps, reminding each, "Your hair, your heritage, is part of your power, not a weakness." That afternoon at the headquarters of World Athletics in Monaco, Jamari sat with the Federation's executive board to finalize the new Global Athlete Expression Code. The code, co-drafted with athletes' commissions, banned any appearance-based lane or uniform restrictions and mandated annual equity audits for every member federation. With cameras rolling from every continent, Jamari placed the final signature next to the Federation president's, a symbolic ink stroke binding the sport's most storied institution to a future of inclusivity. Returning to the Olympic Village 1 year later as a mentor to the newest generation of sprinters, Jamari observed athletes of every background racing through the same starting blocks. No special dress codes, no forced hair alterations, just raw talent and unfiltered identity. On the final day, he stood on the medal podium during the Volunteer Awards ceremony, not for his own victory, but to honor the volunteer hairstylists who'd worked pro bono to prepare athletes with locks, braids, and natural curls. As he presented them with certificates, he reflected, "The greatest gold isn't won on the track, but in the hearts and minds we change along the way." Under the twilight glow of the stadium lights, Jamari Ellis walked off the infield with his head held high, his locks free in the breeze, each twist a testament to resilience. Behind him, the newly carved motto on the athlete's tunnel read, "Run true, be you, break every barrier." And as the next generation of sprinters charged into view, Jamari knew the rule had been rewritten. Sport would no longer dictate who an athlete must be, but celebrate exactly who they are.